All right, folks, welcome once again to our YouTube live channel here. We're going to talk some recruiting today. Once again, it's Christian McCollum and Mike Frank from Irish Sports Daily. And a lot going on as far as Notre Dame goes. It's interesting. Big kind of recruiting weekend this weekend. And some of the guys we're going to talk about today are actually going to be on campus. And so, Christian, it was interesting because last week we kind of talked about rankings and where some of these players that Notre Dame is recruiting are ranked and that type of thing. And I've been kind of a little bit concerned about the safety position because there's just not a lot of what I would classify elite guys as far as, well, certainly as rankings go. That's not necessarily my evaluations, which we're going to get into, but it seems like once again we're looking at a bunch of different guys that their ranking doesn't really kind of match when you watch them on film. I've been kind of surprised. And so, I think I was a little concerned about where are they with these players and are these the types of guys that can get you over the top and that type of thing. And, just rewatching them again to prepare for this show, I feel a little bit better about where they're at with this safety position. I like a lot of these guys, and we'll talk about them individually here, but I think this is just yet another situation where Notre Dame has recruited is recruiting guys where I'm just kind of surprised by their rankings, and I think that they're in a better position than maybe some people anticipate. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a common theme, like you touched on last week, where Notre Dame's evaluations seem to be different from the rankings people, and at some point you ask yourself who you trust. And when there's some of those receivers that we've seen, we talked about Tennessee offering a bunch of kids after Notre Dame recently. Some of that will track, right? So you'll say, oh, well, who cares if he's a 3-star, if he's got, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame. In the safety, some of the guys, they're a little bit even ahead where a few of the guys don't quite have that lengthy list of high Power 5 offers. But like you said, when you watch the film, they're impressive guys, and these are guys Notre Dame wants. These are the guys that they're going after. And, obviously there's a tier and there's a ranking system to it. But these are some of the guys that Notre Dame really, really wants to add, and they think that can get them over the hump, like you said.
All right, let's start with Marquis Gallegos, guy who just recently visited. Christian, I love this guy, and you see where he's playing now, and I think this is where he, needs to play. I think he's kind of a deep safety type of guy. But look at this guy. He is one heck of an athlete. He can cover a tremendous amount of ground. He just looks like more of kind of your deep safety type of guy. And Notre Dame's kind of lacked a guy that can get deep and just cover a lot of ground. I know he's certainly high on Notre Dame's list as far as on their board and everything, but this is a guy that certainly he has a lot of offers and is probably one of the top ranked guys as far as the rankings go. But I can see why this guy is the kind of guy where you can just let him back there and making plays like that, just anticipating plays. He has such great instincts to find the football. And I just really think that this guy, if they could land him and pair him with more of a box safety type of guy, that's pretty good. And I think right now we're looking at probably 3 safeties for sure when all is said and done. But if I had my choice, this would be, I don't know if he's the very top guy, but he certainly is 1A if he's not the top guy for me. What are your thoughts on him? And where do you think Notre Dame is with this right now?
Yeah, like you said, you can see he's really, really comfortable back there. And when he decides he's coming up to make a play, he comes. So, yeah, he's definitely one of the top tier guys for them. He's not a guy that just takes visits just to take visits. So as you mentioned, he was on campus last week or this past weekend. That went really well by all accounts. He had already visited for the spring game a year ago. So that's, really interesting that a kid that doesn't love taking visits, not that doesn't like it, but he's not one of these guys that's just out there, taking a tour every single weekend to see the country. So just getting him there multiple times on his own dime is definitely encouraging. He's not a kid that's going to be in a rush. He doesn't have a real identified timetable. And USC is a school that's pushing real hard. So they're going to have to battle them. The other schools he's visited, he has visited Midwestern schools. You look at Michigan State, schools like that, Ohio State. Obviously, USC, UCLA, Oregon, those schools on the West Coast. He's also checked out some schools down south like A&M and LSU. And I believe he's going to go to Oklahoma later. But at the same time, it's that kind of age-old question when it comes to Notre Dame. They seem like kind of the answer to the SAT question, right? The school that is different from the rest. And I think he recognizes that. Is that a good thing? I think it is. I think he's going to come back for an official visit in June. So obviously there's something there that he wants to see and compare further. So I think Notre Dame's a good chance. Chris O'Leary does a great job with these guys. Chris O'Leary, whenever you hear about him or, see people write about him, they always talk about his energy. I encourage all viewers, listeners to go check out Chris O'Leary's mic'd up recently from last week at practice. You can't fake that kind of energy. And every single kid I talk to talks about that when they were being recruited as safety.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, unfortunately, the poor man just hasn't had a whole lot of luck in recruiting because of some crazy things that have happened, in the Peyton Bowen thing, and then of course the Hillman situation. And it's just we got to hope he can close. But right there's a great clip of just showing, attacking downfield and his kind of speed and ability to tackle. So I really like him. Next up is Kennedy Urlacher, another guy who should be coming soon. Is it this week or is it spring game? I can't remember.
He's coming this weekend.
This weekend. Okay. Yeah, that's correct. This guy, it's interesting when you watch this guy. He's a big hitter like his dad. I think he's more kind of a box safety and maybe even a guy who could grow into a rover position, but just really good instincts, seems to find the ball really well. There's not a lot of coverage of him kind of man on man, but a good athlete. This is a guy who can run and turns well. Doesn't quite have the explosion out of his first couple steps like Gallegos would, but there's different positions at safety and different needs, and he's a sure tackler for sure. Somebody who comes down hard and crashes to the ball and just has good instincts in finding the football. So I can see why Notre Dame is very interested in him. He's essentially, I think, going to be what I would call a linebacker playing safety. Again, he could grow into a rover at some point, but look at that big hit, just great instincts to find the football and can turn left and right. So I think he's, like I said, more of a box safety, but somebody that I think would be a very good take on Notre Dame's part at this point. So where do you think he stands? Obviously, he's one of those guys that seems interested coming up. Not the highest ranking and doesn't have a lot of big-time offers at this point. But, again, you can see him there coming down hard in the run game, sure tackler. I just think this guy's going to be a really good football player.
Yeah, like we said, he visits this weekend, so that's going to really be, pivotal. When he was offered, he was one of those kids that basically said he was speechless by the offer. And Notre Dame's done a good job of proving that he's a priority for them. We talked about O'Leary earlier. He's had plenty of conversations with Al Golden, Marcus Freeman, Chad Bowden. And Notre Dame has what he's looking for, right? He's got, among his offers, he said he doesn't have a ton of high majors, but he has Penn State offer. He also has a Stanford offer, and he also has some Ivy League offers. So that, that tells you right there that he kind of would fit what Notre Dame wants. On the surface, it's definitely a fit. Usually when you're talking to NFL kids that are from NFL backgrounds like him, the dads usually understand Notre Dame. The people that come across in the league from Notre Dame leave good impressions. So they're usually very, very interested in it. But the kid also wants to play, right? So he's a football player. He doesn't want to come in and necessarily not see a path to the field ever. So Notre Dame will have to show him that. He's taken other visits. He's already been to like Kansas and Kansas State. He's also been down to Miami. Oklahoma is another school that's pretty big in contact.
Yeah, the thing that I think people need to understand is when he talks about Notre Dame pretty much calling him every single day, right? They're not going to spend that much time calling somebody if they don't really want him. And I think that's what you're seeing here. And if you've been listening to Power Hour and you've been listening to things that I've said when it comes to this and what to be looking for as far as spring recruiting is, Notre Dame wants to get their best players on campus as soon as they can. That way, they know, hey, this is a guy we really like and somebody we want to consider, and then also get them on campus so they know it's a fit, so they can bring them in for the June official visit. So you're starting to see Notre Dame bring in all their very top guys, and we've seen it, and that was the most important thing. I had said, hey, it's important to make sure that these guys get on campus so you know whether you have a shot and you know whether he fits the culture and that type of thing. And so trying to get Urlacher up soon was very, very important, and they've done a good job with that. And the other thing that I think to point out too, Christian, is his dad was a late bloomer. He was not an elite prospect coming out of high school, and certainly turned out to be a pretty good player in the end. So
he was okay, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't too bad. So, so anyway, I just think that the sky is the limit for this guy. His potential, I think, is going to be really, really good, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people no matter where he goes. So, all right, the next guy I want to talk about, I know we just recently did you did a story with his coach, is Kingston Lopa, a guy who was committed before to Arizona, backed off that commitment from Sacramento, California, Grand Union High School. Oh boy, I'm telling you, this guy is a tremendous prospect, Christian. I love this kid. I think he's just going to be a star. Just a very, very physical kid, and you can see his height there. I know his coach said 6'5". I don't know if he's 6'5", but he's definitely at least 6'3", probably 6'4". And just a tremendous athlete. One thing I'll notice there, you'll notice a couple times here, he just kind of lowers his shoulder. He needs to become a better tackler. You're not going to just be able to bounce into guys, and I think he does it here again. That's not going to work, right? Not in the college game. So you're going to have to learn how to tackle. He does show the ability to tackle. The interesting thing, though, James or Christian, here is there's only 6 games that we have of film, but for 6 games, it's very, very impressive. He can also run and cover a lot. Cover a lot of field. He kind of looks like Kyle Hamilton on the field. I think he could play deep safety, but I think obviously what you'd like to do is get a guy like Gallegos and let him kind of patrol the middle of the field there, and bring a kid like this and bring him closer to the line of scrimmage like they did with Kyle Hamilton. And certainly he created all kinds of havoc. But you can just tell, you don't see guys that are 6'4" that can turn as well as he can in space and change direction. And it shows that kind of agility. So I'm surprised this guy isn't a really high 4-star player. I know he's picked up a lot of offers, and I think that's going to continue now that he's a little more open to some teams. But I think this guy's another very underrated player. A lot of teams are going to be coming after him, of course. I really like Lopa. What's your feel on this?
Yeah, he's a guy that, first of all, like you said, he needs to wrap up and stuff. But the one thing I'll tell you, he's not just physical, he's violent.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing. Even that receiver clip of him just blocking this dude into the boundary. So, he's not a kid that's going to be afraid to tackle. You can teach someone like that how to tackle, that's for sure. But he's a guy that Notre Dame felt good about even before he publicly backed off that Arizona commitment, which is always a good sign, right? And then, like I said, once he backed off that, Notre Dame really turned the heat up. And it was a thing where, the kid kind of felt a little overwhelmed by the recruiting process, kind of enamored by, everything that was going on with it, took an unofficial visit to Arizona, really liked it, thought, hey, maybe I could take some pressure off everything by just pulling the trigger here, and then realized, man, I got a lot more options I need to consider. And Notre Dame is one of those options he'd always been considering, always been talking about it. So now that he's kind of, backed off and said, hey, let me slow things down a little bit. He doesn't have forever to slow things down, but he's kind of just sitting here and figuring out what's next. In addition to Notre Dame and Arizona, USC, Oregon, Texas, Oklahoma, LSU, Michigan, Washington, schools like that are all off after him, and you can see why. But Notre Dame seems like they've always had his attention.
All right. I think it's important to these are the types of players you got to start landing if you're going to get over the top, Christian. And this guy has plus athletic skills.
I mean, they really, really want this kid. He knows that. And I think they're going to be in the mix. I think Notre Dame is one of the schools he was thinking, I really need to look closely at this school before I'm done making my college decision.
All right. Next guy, I like this guy. And, I know Matt has recently did an update with him. and he has said that he's planning to come. I love this Jaylen McClain kid. I think this kid is a very, very good player. Just a violent, the more you watch this kid's film, and it is lengthy. It is lengthy when you watch this kid. First of all, he's got a 4.3 GPA, a kid that's going to, do well in the classroom. But Christian, I look for football players, right? I look for guys who just constantly can find the football. And look at it, this guy just comes downhill hard. He does not hesitate. He trusts what he's doing, and then he comes in and just makes great tackles. Very, very good feel. A lot of guys would have been sucked in there on that particular play with the play action. Finds the ball carrier. This is just a guy who is a really good football player. He's probably not as athletic as Gallegos or Lopa, but I think he's a fantastic football player. And he's the kind of guy that if he goes to the right place, he's going to start for 3 years, no matter, it's got to be the right place. I don't think if he goes to Georgia, he's going to be a guy that starts for 3 years because they just got so many good players. But if he goes to a place like Notre Dame, who has a big need, I think there's a very good chance he could start for 3 years, and other places that as well that are on his list. So I just like him as his instincts as a run defender. He gets small, he kind of shoots the gaps and just explodes into the ball carrier. The one thing we don't see is a lot of kind of man coverage with him. There's some there, I guess. But it's not really coverage. It's him chasing this down. But you can see he's got some top end speed. He's able to kind of chase this guy down. And, I don't think he's quite as explosive in his first couple steps, but he's just a very good, sound football player and somebody that's probably going to be a team captain just because you can tell the game is important to him. He's just one of those hard worker type of guys. So again, he kind of chases this guy down. Guy didn't have the best angle, but still able to kind of get in there and make a tackle. And unfortunately it was for a touchdown, but just the ability to chase him down was important. So I like this guy. I don't know where Notre Dame stands with him. He has mentioned he wants to come visit, and hopefully they can get that scheduled because I like him as a football player. This guy's look at that, just great instincts, just comes down really hard with a tackle and a sure tackle in open space, which is hard to do, and good anticipation there.
All right. Yeah. So he released the top 10 recently, and Notre Dame's in there along with, a lot of the schools you'd imagine, Penn State, Rutgers, Georgia, Tennessee, Michigan State, USC, Stanford, and Oregon. Penn State clearly has his attention. He's already set an official visit to Penn State for June. And another school to keep an eye out that wasn't in the top 10, but it's coming out recently is Ohio State, right? He's already visited Columbus. They clearly have his attention. Like you said, he's talked about visiting Notre Dame, hasn't set anything else up yet. And obviously Notre Dame's going to need to get him on campus soon in order to stay in the mix here. One interesting kind of tidbit, I did a story with him on his coach. His coach was Brandon Wimbush's offensive coordinator in high school over at St. Peter's Prep. So Jaylen plays in that same league with St. Peter's Prep, Bergen Catholic, Paramus, Don Bosco. So it's a pretty high level, private Jersey ball. But his coach is very familiar with Notre Dame, having gone through the process with Brandon. And he tells me this kid, Jaylen, is absolutely a fit for what Notre Dame wants to do both on and off the field. And I think if Notre Dame's able to get him on campus, he'll have a better chance of understanding that and realizing that. And that's going to give Notre Dame obviously a much, much better chance to land him.
Again, this is a guy that has good offers. He's not ranked necessarily that high, but he has the good offers. And the reason why is teams know he's just a great football player, right? And because they know that, they know what they're getting in him. I think a lot of guys look at, is he that fast? These ranking guys, and you know how I feel about a lot of these ranking guys, but they're just like, is he not the fastest guy? And it's like, you know what? He's a football player. This is a guy who can chase people down. It just has great instincts. And Ohio State, they don't need to go after a guy that, they don't need, Georgia doesn't need to come up to West Orange, New Jersey to come find a guy. There's plenty down south, but they're coming after him because he's such a good football player. All right. Next guy on the list is Davis Andrews. He's from American Fork, Utah. I believe he's coming for a spring game, correct, Christian?
Yes, he's been set to come for the spring game since he got offered.
All right. Let me tell you, I think this kid is going to be a rover. You look at the body there, Chris. He's a thick guy already. I think he's going to end up being a linebacker. But dude, this guy reminds me a lot of Drew Tranquil, right? He's just a really good coverage guy and an extremely smart player. Just very, very, very smart, instinctual football player. It's interesting that that he is being recruited as a safety, but I do think he's he looks at least 6'2" right now, and probably pretty close to 200 pounds. I think he's listed at 190. He'll be 200 easily by the time that they bring him, onto campus wherever he's at. But he's the type of guy that, would go to Utah and start probably 3-4 years and, be all conference. This is just a very, very good football player. You don't see a lot of coverage stuff with him on the film. What you do see, though, is very, very good. The other thing that I like about him, he's always ripping at the ball right there. Sure enough, right when I said it, he's always trying to strip the football, does a great job of doing it, too. And just look at this here. All right, you got to dissect this, but get off those blocks, comes up, makes a tackle, and strips the ball at the same time. I mean, that's a football player. So this is just a guy who's a very smart player, could play a lot of different positions. And I think he's going to be a really good asset to whatever team he plays for. Again, I do think he's going to grow into a linebacker, though. He's just bigger, thicker body. So your thoughts there, Chris?
Yeah, Notre Dame, they told me that, this kid is just an absolute stud, right? And this is back months ago before everyone kind of knew him, like true absolute stud, guy they absolutely loved, should be considered towards the top of the board. And like I mentioned, as soon as he was offered in January, he was like, I'm coming for the spring game. Like they got that set up like in that phone call or shortly thereafter. He's another kid, called the Notre Dame offer a dream offer when he got it. Freeman and O'Leary both visited his school prior to the offer, and the kid was it was like the school stopped. The kid said it was like rock stars basically coming into the school. So you see that kind of impact, especially when you get out far to a place like Utah. Really the weight of Notre Dame's brand. Look down his list. He's probably going to try to take official visits and then decide this summer. Obviously, we talk about, kid from Utah, the other schools involved. Utah and BYU are obviously going to be real factors. Stanford is very involved. UCLA is another school he's already been to. He's been to UCLA and Stanford. He's talked about wanting to get down to Tennessee. So clearly a kid that has his eyes open to a lot of different factors and a lot of different places and, environments. And I think that's a good thing for Notre Dame. So, Notre Dame, like you said, he'll get the chance to host them next week. I'm guessing he's going to be impressed, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him come back for an official visit this summer.
I like this kid. He's just a very good football player. Just great instincts. I hope Notre Dame lands him and he gets in the class. Again, we'll see where he ends up, but I can totally understand why Notre Dame wants him as a football player. Next guy on the list, Chris, is a guy that I absolutely love, and his name is Dejuan Lane. And we don't know at this point. I haven't seen much about him since his offer as far as how interested he is in Notre Dame. Before we get into it, what are your thoughts there? Because I just haven't seen a whole lot.
Yeah. So from Notre Dame side of things, he's definitely a guy that's on the board, right? So now forget about his talent. Sometimes it's mutual interest, how high is he on the board. But he's definitely a guy that's on the board. He doesn't talk a lot. So a lot of people, nobody really knows where he stands. Sounds like Penn State is one school that seriously has his attention. So they're going to be a ton of, school to beat. Michigan's trying to get involved. Expect that kind of, Big Ten, ACC kind of interest. But as far as Notre Dame, they at least think they have a shot. How much of a shot? I'm not sure, but they at least think they have a shot.
I mean, this guy's legit 6'3". He's going to be 200 pounds when he arrives as well. But he's more athletic, I think, than Andrews. And this guy, I think, is just going to be a star. I think he's tremendous. And when you watch the film, Chris, I mean, I don't know how many interceptions this guy had, but it was a crazy amount of numbers. He's just always around the football, has really good long speed, a guy who can really, really run, but also can turn well, turns very, very well in space for a 6'3" guy. And lots of just really, and the interesting thing when you watch his interceptions, Chris, it's not like they're wounded duck throws where somebody's just throwing the ball up for whatever. I mean, he just makes very good anticipation as far as where the ball is going to be, and just finds the football. And I just think when you look at his overall athleticism, this is a guy who I think is right up there with anybody else as far as who Notre Dame is looking at. There's a reason George has offered this kid. Again, that he's a really, really good athletic football player, and his best football is definitely ahead of him. He's going to be a big time player. I'll be shocked if he isn't. Again, look at some explosion there, power. This guy can flat run. He's a good player. The one thing that worries me there, Notre Dame just hasn't had a lot of luck with Gilman players, unfortunately, Chris.
That's true. That's true. I mean, you look at a lot of these highlights. He's obviously on offense or have the ball in his hands, and he's an electric player. He could be the kind of guy that could be a game changing player back there, wherever he ends up.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate because, you'd think that Gilman would be a school that Notre Dame could do really well at. They've had some players in the past come and just haven't really had a lot of success with that school. And I think that hurts Notre Dame a little bit because of that. And as you mentioned, a lot of those guys they are very interested in Penn State. I know one thing, I sure would hate to see Penn State land him and McClain, that's for sure, because those are two really, really good football players that I'd like to end up at Notre Dame at some point. So I think they're both outstanding. Next guy is Oliver Miles. Be interesting to see what happens with him. He's a recent offer. What do you know about him so far?
Yeah, so he's a guy, he could play like he could play safety or corner, right? He hasn't, doesn't have a ton of Power 5 offers. So he's one of the kids I was talking about when Notre Dame's evaluation might be a little different than just the rankings. And also, I think, one of the big offers he's looking at right now is Texas Tech. But again, a guy that's on their list, definitely on their board. It's still early for him. And he kind of seems kind of wide-eyed about everything. He was very impressed, blown away with the offer. He understands that, the power of the Notre Dame degree. He referenced it, that's almost like a Harvard degree. It's just a place he's going to have to check out. So he's definitely, I would imagine he's going to visit. Like I said, he doesn't seem like he's in a rush. He doesn't have a lot of other major schools after him right now, which is probably a good thing for Notre Dame. But they're going to have to kind of, get him on campus, open his eyes, and let him know that there's things outside of the Southwest to consider.
Yeah, they list him at 6'2". I don't think he's 6'2". I think he's probably closer to 6 foot. He definitely can run. Kind of laboring though. I don't see him as a corner. I just don't. I don't think he has that kind of short area quickness, explosiveness. I do think he could be a safety. Plays a lot of quarterback. We just don't see him do a lot of stuff as far as defensive goes. So I think he's the kind of guy that probably has the furthest to go to become a starter compared to everybody else that's in this group. But I think he's certainly got a lot of potential and is a heck of an athlete. There's no doubt he's a good athlete, but he just doesn't have that kind of explosive first couple steps and the ability to turn on a dime like you'd think a corner would have. Kind of reminds me of a Ramon Henderson. I'm not sure he's quite as fast as Ramon was as a high school player, but certainly a very good player. Just that's kind of the look I get from him. So we'll be interesting. I know he's mentioned that he'd like to come up, but nothing's scheduled as of yet. All right, finally, Chris. Guy coming soon here, Paul Mencke Jr. From Schertz, Texas, Samuel Clemens High School, visiting this weekend. It's interesting because I watched this kid, and I totally understand where they're coming from here with this guy. You look at his numbers, and you see the 4.7, 740 time he just tested at, and you're like, well, that's not very fast. And to be honest with you, it's not, but I think people would be surprised. Other than a Peyton Bowen, I think a lot of safeties that Notre Dame recruits and a lot of these teams recruit coming out of high school do run 4.7. They're not, the fastest guys and that type of thing. What I like about him is he looks the full 6'2", and he has very, very long arms, and he plays faster than his 40 time. There's no question. And there are certain guys that you can see that you're like, okay, well, I see his 40 time, but then I watch him on film and you're like, wow, he's a lot faster than that. And I think that's what you're going to see with this kid. The other thing that intrigues me with him is when you look at his lower body, see that, Chris? He's very, very skinny. right? He's got a lot of ability to grow there. And when you also look at his vertical, it's only 28.6, which is very, very small. And that tells me this guy is not lifted a lot. And when you haven't lifted a lot and you start lifting your lower body, you're going to become faster. You're going to become more explosive, quicker, and I think that's what they're going to see with this kid. Very nice open field tackle there. I think this kid's going to be a much better player 2 years down the road. And I think Notre Dame looks at it and sees a mound of clay there, sees how skinny he is, sees the vertical, and realizes this kid just really hasn't lifted much. And when he does, he's going to be a lot more explosive player and one heck of an athlete. So I like his instincts. Seems to find the ball really well in traffic. He anticipates the play well. I think he's a very good tackler as well. I think if you look at him now, he's probably more of a box safety, but I think once he becomes lifting, he's a guy who could play deep safety because I think he's just got some athleticism that just isn't quite developed yet. And I can totally understand why Notre Dame wants him on campus. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to really develop as he gets more time in the weight room. What do you think Notre Dame's shot is here, and what do we know about this situation right now?
Yeah, I think they have a good chance depending on how hard they push. I spoke with him the other night, and he's just like really, really excited kid, very interesting kid, very bright kid, very talkative. He's just really, really excited. One of the things that I think people need to take into account, and it's not just for NIL purposes, because that's usually the first thing everyone thinks about these days, but the power of Notre Dame's brand when it's on display, especially in a day of social media, is very evident, and it really can take these kids, and really impress them. And what I mean is, when I spoke to him, he said, man, when I tweeted out that I was visiting Stanford, I don't know, I had, 100 likes or whatever it was. He said, when I tweeted out that I was going to Notre Dame, that got 15 times that in an hour, right? That's what it really does. It tells the kid, Notre Dame is not just another school. This is something that's big time. So it's definitely something he's going to look forward to. High academic kid. Duke is definitely in the mix already. He's got some Ivy League offers. Stanford's another school that's in the mix. So he's looking for that stuff. He's a thoughtful kid, like I said, and he wants to have a decision by the summer. That's where I think maybe, it could end up being, Notre Dame's gonna have to make some decisions in terms of, who are they ready to take and who are they still waiting on. That could be one of those situations here. But like you said, man, his ceiling's extremely high here.
I think so too, and you just saw him chase down a play there. It just kind of shows his long speed. This kid's a lot faster than he shows on his 40 time. And again, I think he's just going to be one of those guys that once he gets his lower body developed, he's going to be a really good football player. So exciting to see. And so I'm looking at this, Chris, and I'm seeing, okay, well, Gallegos already been on campus. Urlacher is coming. Hopefully Lopa says he's gonna. McClain says he has. I think that's a little less sure at this point. Davis Andrews is coming. We got to hope Dejuan Lane is. Oliver Miles has talked about it. We know Mencke's definitely coming. I think they're in good shape, as far as getting the guys on campus. I think it's important to get Lopa up very soon, and hopefully that happens. And, we'll see what happens with Lane. I like that guy a lot. I'd be thrilled with, some combination of Gallegos, Urlacher, Lopa, McClain, Andrews, Lane, any of these guys, I think would be a good situation. For me, I'd probably put Gallegos, Lopa, and Lane as the very top guys as far as athletic and ability at this point. But I do think a guy like Mencke could grow into that type of player. I think McClain is just a fantastic football player. You take him no matter what. He's just a really good football player. So, and I think they're in good. I do. I think they're in good position with a lot of these guys, and we'll just have to see what happens. So, kind of where we're at. Your final thoughts on the safety board?
Yeah, like we said, the top Gallegos getting there for that multiple unofficial visits is huge. Shows a lot of interest in him and by his part, and he's obviously one of your top guys. Urlacher coming in, another guy that you're really, really high on. And then, Andrews as well. So you look at Andrews and Lopa. Those are probably the most likely guys, depending on where Mencke falls in that list. And I think they're in good shape. It's hard to be like, oh, yeah, they're going to get that guy. They're definitely going to get him. But I don't think there's any way they could be in that position with any of those guys at this point. So they're in as good a shape as they can be. And like we say, every time they have a big weekend, Notre Dame crushes it. Under this staff with recruiting weekend. So that's where you want to be. Get these guys on campus. Let us do our thing and then figure out where it goes from there. And like I said earlier, it's hard to overstate Chris O'Leary's energy and enthusiasm. It's the kind of stuff you can't fake. So like guys just love that. So I think being around that in person is also going to help Notre Dame. So like I said, they're about as good a shape as they can be with these guys.
All right. We got a lot of questions. We talked about last week, some people asking questions about some players that Notre Dame was in on in the past and they went elsewhere. We did get some of those questions. So I want to kind of we'll talk about that moving forward here. We got a lot of good ones here. So I just want to kind of hit those real quick. The first one is Taylor Decker, went on to star at OSU. In the NFL after he decommitted to Notre Dame. I think it was lost in the coaching change, but is there anything any ND could have done to keep him? I would have said no. I think once that coaching change happened, that was kind of the end of it for him. And I think Ohio State had been kind of working that one for a while. And I think he would have probably stuck with Notre Dame had they not had that situation. But when that happened, that kind of opened the door for that situation. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I'm pretty sure he was like the first commit of that class. I feel like,
one of the first.
Yeah. These little things stick with you. It's frustrating for me. I had him on the phone right after he decommitted. He deconfirmed it, and I lived in this, kind of subterranean apartment that had really crappy service, and I lost the service and I couldn't get him back. That's literally everything. Every time I hear his name, I think of that phone conversation that was dropped 15 years ago.
Yeah, no doubt. I know how that goes. All right, Nicholas Petit Ferrer. This was. I know a lot of people don't know this, or I shouldn't say, they don't want to believe it. Okay, but the bottom line, Chris, is he just felt more comfortable amongst the players and more, I think, the student body at Ohio State. It's a more diverse situation. And for you as an African-American man, you grew up with your mother is white. And so, it's probably not as big of a shock to you as it is to a lot of other guys. But I mean, I don't think people understand that, Chris. I just don't think they understand that. And they just discount it like it's not a big deal. But I've often said, hey, why don't you just walk around Grambling for a while? You just go to the school at Grambling as a white person and just, it's not that anybody's going to be rude to you or anything. It's just a different environment, and you just don't feel as comfortable as you would being around a whole bunch of people who grew up and had similar life situations as you do. And so I think that had as much to do with it as anything. And your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think his mom also was a big factor in it. And I'm not saying she didn't want me at Notre Dame or anything, but it was like in terms of like, where do you feel most comfortable? And that's, like you said, like, that's exactly like what recruiting comes down to, right? Like, yeah, you're sacrificing a lot. You understand that, I can get this degree and set me up for life. I can sacrifice this and these people can get me to the NFL. Yeah, you're going to factor all that in. But then also on the table is where do I feel comfortable? And you'll hear the kids say, if I wasn't playing football, would I still want to go to this school? Yeah. And when you ask that question, and for some kids, it's just like, nah, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be at Notre Dame if I wasn't playing football. And when I met Ferrer in person down at the Under Armour game. And once I talked to him, real nice kid, very polite. I think I had to chase him down a little bit and he made time for me. But once I talked to him, I was like, he's not coming to Notre Dame. There's no real chance. And if anyone that sees me in person, remind me, I got a real funny Petit Ferrer story from that interview. It's one of my funniest, but I can't really say it's not inappropriate or anything like that, but I prefer to only tell in person.
Yeah, exactly. Boy, do I have a bunch of those. All right. Christian Gonzalez, projected to be a high draft pick. He was once committed to Purdue. CMND had some serious momentum heading into his official visit. anything they could have done there? What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, he wasn't a fit from either side, right? From him, he was super quiet, a super quiet recruit. And a lot of times you think these kids are super quiet because they don't want to talk to me, which is fine. But then when they get around everybody else, they're just like normal people. He was super, super, super quiet around everybody. I don't think we were just talking about Petit Ferrer. I don't think he found Notre Dame to be a fit. I don't think Notre Dame really found him to be a fit. Just, not that he's a good guy, bad guy, or anything like that. It doesn't make him a bad kid. I just don't think that they thought it was going to work from that perspective.
All right. Jordan Addison, underrated, under the radar recruit, and he seemed to stop recruiting. Notre Dame did not stop recruiting him. What happened there is they were recruiting him as a safety. Why? I have no idea. Dumbest thing ever. And I mean, they had a great shot at that kid. And everybody on our staff loved that kid. We just loved his film, loved everything about him. And I think that Notre Dame had a great shot, but they just kept saying safety, safety, safety. And he was like, nope, 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 nope. And that was the end of that. And that's just really the bottom line of that.
And he was like literally still like, I don't want to say he was considering them, but he was still engaging them. So he clearly had interest in Notre Dame as a whole. He just thought he was a receiver. And I mean, what does he know? But obviously it worked out for him. And anybody that follows us on the board, they know that we have this college football fantasy leagues that we take pretty seriously. And me and my buddies, like every time Jordan Addison, I'm like, yep, Notre Dame, they thought he was a safety. They didn't think he could play receiver. So just crazy. Just too bad, really.
Yeah. I want to hear about Ronald Darby. And then he mentions Thomas Graham, and he said, I believe there were rumors how Indy botched both recruitments. Darby, I don't think necessarily was a botched situation. I just don't think that they did a very good job of recruiting him, meaning I don't think that they put as much effort into it as they probably should have. I think they felt like, here's a guy who, Rhodes Scholar, we're going to land this guy, and just didn't do what they probably needed to do. Thomas Graham, I'll let you tell that story, and tell it, Chris. Tell it what it is.
So Thomas Graham, I'm convinced, was going to go to Notre Dame. Okay. And before the in-home visit, I was in communication with his father, very consistently, right? Like literally right before the visit starts, I'm going to call you after the visit. He calls me after the visit, and I'm like, what's up? And he was just like almost speechless. And he was like, yo, I don't, he was just like stunned. I'm like, what happened? And he was like, it was like right in the immediate aftermath. And he was still trying to figure out what it all meant or but it didn't matter what it meant to him because it went to his wife. Notre Dame, Brian Kelly and Todd Light, they didn't eat. They refused to eat the food during the in-home visit, which was their only in-home visit of the night. They said they had eaten on the plane. And that was very, very off-putting to the Graham family. And it wasn't like it was an awkward situation. It made more awkward, and it went south from there. And that's exactly what happened, because even I met up with Thomas's father in Orlando a couple weeks later for the Under Armour game, and he literally marched me over to his wife to have her tell me the story, and that was it. I mean, these in-home visits, it might seem like a kind of a minor thing, but like, their thought was, how am I supposed to trust this guy with my son, and he won't even trust me to eat? And it wasn't like some extravagant meal. Yeah. I forget exactly what it was. It wasn't, some exotic food that maybe we don't want to touch. And it was just very off-putting, and things went south from there quickly.
The interesting part about it is, this lady went to the time and effort to actually make this food, and you don't eat it. And the most important thing that I think people don't understand too was, his dad used to call you all the time and say, can you tell them to recruit my son harder? Because his dad and mom wanted him to go there, and they just weren't doing the work, just were not calling him like they should have. And he was getting upset about it. And then they come in there and basically spit in the eye of the family and not eat his food. And it's one of those things. It's just, what are you going to do? So
he was obviously a great player at Oregon. And the thing, he's young, right? So I'm pretty sure he left early. He didn't start college. I think he was like 16 or a young 17 when he started college, 17 probably. And then he left early, and he was just a great kid, great family. He's got an older sister, and they're like very competitive. They go back and forth. They have a great relationship. He would have been a great fit at Notre Dame. Absolutely. All around. And it was just a big miss.
could you imagine if he would have been the corner at that time? You know, it would have been just a tremendous defense at that point. And that was kind of it's just such a big blow. I mean, there's just been some crazy stories over the year. I won't mention the name, but I remember, Chris, you remember I called you and told you that a certain player I was talking to, a certain, I don't want to say who it was, but I was talking to somebody, and they told me that this player still at 17 years old slept in the same bed with his mom.
Yeah.
I swear to God that happened. I swear to God.
Big time player too. Big time player. Big time player.
Yeah, and was committed to Notre Dame, and then was not later. And he actually ended up being a good player. He really did. Shocking, though. I mean, these are just kind of the stories that we hear over the years, and it's been a lot of fun. Let's see. So we got a football question here. Was Ziegler moving inside? Does that have any impact on the recruiting slots for the linebacker or any position moves that might be coming? Well, I think first of all, I think that they're high on Ziegler. I think they think Ziegler could be a really good player, and they know that he can be an inside player. I think that they also know that Jalen Sneed is going to be kind of that rover moving forward, and so they moved him to that position. Now, will that impact recruiting? I would assume, but I don't know exactly how. You know, people have said how many people or how many linebackers will you take in this class? I don't think you need more than 2, but again, we'll see whether somebody bounces and leaves. You know, if certain guys don't play at some point, they're just going to be upset and move. But I think Nolan Ziegler is a guy that's kind of rising at this point, and a guy who they like quite a bit and think can be a pretty good player. So I think that would be it. All right. Next question. Can you go over the story again of the quarterback recruit who showed up for a visit, but I believe our OC decided to go on a mini vacation instead of staying in town for the recruit's visit? It was Mark Sanchez, and I remember his dad calling me and just dumbfounded, absolutely dumbfounded. The funny thing was, it was Bill Jedrick who was the offensive coordinator, and my understanding, allegedly, he didn't even leave town. He was in town and still didn't go. Still didn't go because he was on vacation. This is allegedly. I don't know 100% sure, but this is what Mark Sanchez's dad told me. And he was mad. He was extremely angry. And I don't blame him. And he's like, he said, my son really had a really, really strong interest in Notre Dame. And he said, I really thought he was going to go there. But, if the OC can't find enough time to just come over and meet. And he said, by the way, that's the quarterback's coach too. It's not just the OC. He's the guy that's going to be coaching my kid every day. If he doesn't have the time to do that, then we don't have the time for him. And I just told him, I said, you know what? I don't blame you at all. I really don't. I would look at it exactly the same way.
Mike, I had a Power 5, a 2025 quarterback or 2024 quarterback a couple years ago. He was doing a tour with his family, kind of a he's a high profile kid now, but he wasn't at the time. Was doing a tour with his family down south, and they said, hey, let's stop by. I think it was Virginia Tech. We didn't call anybody. We hadn't planned this. We haven't set it up. But we're in town. Let's just swing by. And they made a phone call to their recruiting liaison or whoever it was. Just let them know. Hey, we're thinking about stopping by. Is that okay? It was a Sunday. Every single coach on staff was home, and they all went to greet this kid.
I just don't even understand it sometimes. Some of the stuff that we've heard over the years, it's crazy. Next week, can you go you said in the past there have been some recruits who wanted to commit to Notre Dame, but ND said, we can't take your commitment right now. Can you name 2 commits that wanted to commit to Notre Dame that ended up being really good football players that we turned down? Gosh, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think.
Everyone points to, and I don't know. Yeah, Kuechly's the one that wanted Notre Dame.
Luke Kuechly, yeah. That was definitely one.
There's some, and obviously Pat Fitzgerald. But in terms of, there's some recent ones, right, that you don't really want to, and I don't know if they turned out to be good players.
Yeah.
I'll think about that more and answer that one on the board.
Another funny story. There was a player that ended up at Notre Dame, and this was back in the days when this was the Davie era, and they were recruiting so poorly towards the end. And there was a player I remember I was talking to a specific coach, and he said, "Yeah, we're gonna go down and take a look at this kid. We may offer, we may not. We'll just see." And so the coach went down there and offered him, and then I heard back. I said, "Well, what's the story?" And yeah, he's an okay player, but I don't think we're going to push on him. I said, "Oh, you sure?" And he's, yeah. No, I don't think we're going to recruit this kid. Okay. So I'm kidding you not. Not even an hour later, I all of a sudden on the board, there's this thing that says ex-player committed to Notre Dame, and I said, "What?" And I was like, well, so I get on the phone, I call this kid. He's like, yeah. They came down and they offered me, and I committed. And I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, have you called them?" And he said, "No, I haven't called them yet. I just called the paper and told them, because I told them I'd tell them first." And I said, "You haven't called Notre Dame yet?" And he said, "No." And so they didn't offer that kid. And he ended up going to Notre Dame. I think he may have played one play the entire time, if I remember right. And got a degree, but he worked the game, man. And so
he got it in
Notre
there.
Dame was like, Notre Dame was like, well, what do we do now? We don't want to embarrass the kid, and this was, it was very taboo back then to have some kid commit and then come back later and say, well, you can't do this, So they were just stuck with him. It was just crazy.
Now it happens all the time. I mean, you look at guys all the time. It's kind of a regular thing. You feel bad for the kid, right? There's got to be a little bit more understanding of the way to do this so that it doesn't come back on you. I mean, it happened with the kid that's at Purdue now playing receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. What was his name? David Bell.
Sheffield. Well,
Sheffield.
Damn, they would have loved David Bell.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not thinking about it. Yeah. Sheffield. All right. So here's the story. Wants to know on Skoronski. It was interesting because I think Notre Dame felt they had that one in the bag, and I think that's the reason he ended up at Northwestern. Right? They just felt like that he was coming no matter what, and then chose Northwestern. And I just don't think that they worked it as hard as they probably could have or should have. And I think that was a big error. We absolutely loved him. And he was a good kid too, Chris. He was a really nice kid and would have fit in really, really well at Notre Dame. But I think they just got it outworked on that one, unfortunately. And that was kind of, I'd hate to say it, but that was kind of par for the course sometimes at that point. Christian, give us your best mock class.
Overlooked Northwestern.
Yeah, I think they did. They didn't think they were as big a thing as they wanted. So, Christian, can you give us your best mock draft for this class, knowing it's early, but give it a shot? Same question for you, Mike. I mean, it's just impossible to say without any of these guys visiting. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. I'll go down real quick and say, guys, I think they have a legit shot at, and without thinking about the numbers and all that stuff. Darian Dupree, the running back, visits today. I think they have a good shot at him. I think they have a good shot at Kedron Young with him scheduled and official. We talked about receiver last week. We talked about receiver last week. I would put, Canyon and Jason Robinson towards the top of the list. At tight end, I think they have a real shot at Carter Nelson. I think they have a shot at not all, but a lot of these offensive linemen on our target list, minus the Brandon Baker kid. He hasn't really followed through on a lot of stuff. But I think they have a good shot at Caleb Brewer, Kevin Haywood, Gerby Lambert, Styles Prescott. Defensive line, I think they have a good shot at the twins, the Smith twins. I still think they have a good shot at Justin Scott. Obviously, Bryce Young. TJ Lindsey at end, Elijah Rushing at end, Logan Thomas at end, Benedict Ume at end, Malachi Williams at end. Linebacker, obviously Peyton Pierce just committed to Ohio State, no surprise. I think they have a good shot at the Bodie Cahoon kid, and I think they have a great shot at Cole Sullivan.
You don't think they're going to get Kingston Villamu Asa?
He keeps saying he's going to visit, and then he cancels it a week later.
Yeah, so I don't. Until he visits, I think I like that player though. I'd like to see him. No Lightfoot as well.
Yeah, I think Lightfoot's a guy that I think it'll be up to kind of Notre Dame. I think they have a better chance at them if they push hard on him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
It's interesting though, because we were talking about this, and when you look at the situation, Justin Scott, nose guard, right? Owen Waffle, nose guard. Bryce Young, I know they're thinking strong side defensive end, and he could be, but he's a guy who could grow into a defensive tackle when you look at it. You just look at his body. TJ Lindsey, certainly a defensive tackle at 270 already. Mayo is a guy who could easily grow into a defensive tackle, but probably a strong side defensive end. Elijah Rushing is at least I think a strong side defensive end, but boy, you look at his body, I think he could be a defensive tackle. Jacob Smith's probably certainly a Viper, but and Logan Thomas is a Viper. Malachi Williams probably a Viper, but Ume I think certainly a strong side defensive end. So you got to get the Vipers, and that's the one thing that I'm concerned about is you got to make sure you land some quality Vipers in this class. But sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. I think they'll keep fighting for Caleb Beasley at corner. Aaron Scott. On safety, we went over the safeties, but obviously Gallegos, Urlacher, and Andrews are among the top, along with Lopa.
Yeah. All right. So we got some more questions here. Wanted to get to. Can you say how close was Jackson Arnold to decommit from Oklahoma? Well, I think that was a situation where he wanted to take a visit, but Notre Dame has the policy that you have to decommit, and I don't like that policy, Chris, especially in that situation. Why would he decommit if he doesn't even know for sure that he wants to go to Notre Dame, right? I don't like that policy. I understand why they have it, because it means you got to show interest. But, they probably lost an opportunity to get a pretty good player, and maybe he would have flipped, maybe he would have not. But I do think that Notre Dame was a little bit cautious of – they didn't want a kid to come on campus that turned him down later. And they also didn't want to turn off Kenny Mencke in case, that thing ended up flipping and that type of thing. And I think they kind of were in the same boat with both players saying, decommit and come visit. And Mencke did, and Jackson Arnold didn't. But I think that was pretty much – I think if he wasn't forced to decommit, he probably would have come on a visit, and then who knows. So
I think part of that policy is also just the idea of they don't let their commits take official visits, so they don't want to be like hypocritical. But I'm like, who cares? That's your commit. If you let them come visit us, that's your problem. Yeah. The only way I describe Arnold, he was very tight-lipped down the stretch, and I don't think everything he was saying publicly was the same everything he was saying privately, which doesn't have to be. But I think Notre Dame had a better chance at him than public people knew. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. What happened with Mitchell, the cornerback who committed to Penn State? I thought Indy was very hopeful about him. I think he was regarded as a premier cornerback in the class. I'm not even sure who he's talking about. You?
He's talking about John Mitchell. We referenced him last week. He's a kid from Mandarin.
The kid from French's high school.
Correct. I mean, he came up. He was always like Penn State, and I think he was just comparing the two. And he came up and he liked Penn State more. I'm not sure. I know he was one of Notre Dame's top targets, but I don't think by any stretch was he ever considered Notre Dame considered the leader far and away. Just ended up liking Penn State more.
All right, I thought he was talking about somebody long time ago, so that's where I was confused. And everybody he wants to know about Peyton Bowen. I think that one's been discussed ad nauseum, but there was no doubt he was coming to Notre Dame. It just changed his mind, and I think it happened right then and there. And I don't blame the kid, to be honest with you. I just don't think he wanted to go to Notre Dame. I think he wanted to go to Oklahoma, and I think he just when push came to shove, just couldn't pull the trigger. And I think he would have done fine at Notre Dame had he come, but I just don't think he felt like that's what he wanted to do. And again, folks, I think that Peyton Bowen was very excited about Notre Dame when they had guys like Keon Keeley and they had some of these other guys, committed. And that's what it takes to get the 5 stars. You got to have more 5 stars in the class. And we've said it many times, Chris, it's hard for kids to make the decision that I want to work that hard in the classroom, right? And it really is that hard to do. I think they're willing to do it if they know that there's other 5-star players and they have a legit chance at a national championship. I think had Keeley stayed in the class, had Notre Dame landed a couple more elite players, I think Bowen would have stuck. But I think because of some of the stuff that happened, I think that hurt him down the stretch, and that's why he ended up going to Oklahoma. So,
and I'll say this for Notre Dame, they did a lot of times these situations, they result in a lot of hurt feelings, and these relationships turn sour quick. Credit Notre Dame staff with really just kind of staying in there. They kind of set pretty strict parameters with him. They laid it all on the table. They said he could, they didn't want him to take an official visit to Oklahoma and Texas and Oregon and all those schools because of that policy we just talked about. But they were really supportive in a sense of him looking around, which is, I think, the only play they had. And just the fact that they were able to, remember they had that additional in-home or whatever it was, that relationship never soured, which I think is a real credit to Notre Dame. And I don't know what else they could have done.
There's nothing they could have done. I think that they did everything they possibly could to land this kid. It just didn't work out. And I think that the effort they did was fine. I think people were saying, well, they probably shouldn't have held on to him so long thinking, but I mean, that's what Hillman was for. And I think you're going to find at Michigan, Hillman's a damn good football player. And had he been in this class, he would have been a damn good football player at Notre Dame too. So it was a blow. I was happy that Hillman was coming because I think he was a nice consolation prize to that whole situation. And unfortunately, it just ended up being what it was. And it was a frustrating thing. So, all right, folks, that's going to be it for the show. That's it for the questions. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. We'll probably be next week. We'll probably be back and not sure exactly which position we'll tackle at this point. Maybe linebacker. I think, want to kind of dive into that and go from there. So thanks for watching, folks. We'll be back next week. And once to mention once again, if you're not a member of Irish Sports Daily, go to the front page of irishsportsdaily.com, click on the premium section, and you can sign up for a subscription. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can see more of our videos just like this moving forward. Thanks for watching, folks, and we will talk to you next week on our recruiting show.